Your Excellency, Shinichi Suzuki, Minister of Finance of Japan, Excellencies, governors, and alternate governors of the African Development Bank Group, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this high-level dialogue on sustainable debt management in Africa, on the margins of TICAD 8, organized by the African Development Bank and the government of Japan. Once again, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to you, Minister Suzuki, and the entire government and people of Japan on the tragic assassination of the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe was a great friend of Africa. He gave exemplary leadership and moved the partnership between Japan and Africa to great heights through the Tokyo International Conference on African Development TICAD. Africa misses Shinzo Abe. The African Development Bank misses Shinzo Abe. I miss Shinzo Abe. May his soul rest in peace. Your Excellencies, without any doubt, the COVID-19 pandemic caused major economic shocks that have put great and unbearable fiscal burdens on African economies, with GDP growth rate declining to minus 1.6% in 2020, the lowest growth rate in more than 2 decades. While growth has recovered to 6.9% in 2021, albeit projected to decline to 4.1% due to the new challenges from Russian war in Ukraine, the effects of the pandemic continues to constrain fiscal space of many African countries. African countries will need at least $424 billion by 2022 to cope with these effects. The situation is made worse by climate change that is costing the continent $7 to $15 billion per year, which is projected to rise to $50 billion by 2030. The fiscal space for response to these massive exogenous shocks has been very different between developed economies and Africa. Of the total $17 trillion in fiscal measures implemented globally, almost $13.5 trillion was by G20 developed economies, and $1.8 trillion by G20 emerging markets. The total value of fiscal support by African countries was only $89.5 billion. And that only represented 3.5% of its GDP and 0.56% of global fiscal interventions. Africa lost a lot of financial inflows due to the pandemic. Foreign direct investment declined from $47.1 billion in 2019 to $39.8 billion in 2020. African countries experienced an outflow of $19 billion in portfolio investments in 2020, compared to a net inflow of $14.5 billion in 2019, as investors simply moved out to safer markets. Remittance flows declined from $87 billion to $83.4 billion. Due to these and other challenges, total Africa public debt as a percentage of GDP increased to 70% in 2021. This is about double from 36% in 2010. Of particular concern is a rapid change in the structure of debt, with private creditors now accounting for 40% of Africa's total external debt. The Debt Service Suspension Initiative, the DSSI, has helped to reduce liquidity challenges, with 38 eligible African countries benefiting from more than $13 billion in savings from debt service moratoriums. However, the debt service moratoriums represented only 25% of total debt service payments of countries for 2020, and 40.1% for 2021. The G20 Common Framework by the G20 and the Paris Club was designed to address the insolvency and illiquidity issues. But so far, it has now been able to be concluded in the 3 participating countries, and those are Chad, Ethiopia, and Zambia. This is due to lack of creditor coordination, information sharing, and procedural transparency, and limited private sector participation. The $630 billion special drawing rights, the SDRs, by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, allocated $33.2 billion to Africa, or just 5% of the total allocation. African leaders have called for a rechanneling of $100 billion of SDRs to Africa, and that a portion of this should be channeled through the African Development Bank. As a AAA-rated financial institution, the African Development Bank can leverage these SDRs by 4 times and deliver larger volumes of financing to Africa. The bank continues to work with the IMF and other willing donor countries on this rechanneling. We are delighted that the United Kingdom has stated its readiness to provide the SDRs through the African Development Bank. We hope that Japan and other SDR donor countries will also positively consider this request of the African heads of state. It will go a long way in supporting Africa in reducing its debt challenges. The 16th replenishment of the African Development Fund, the ADF, presents a great opportunity to provide much-needed concessional financing for Africa's low-income countries and fragile states. I wish to thank the government of Japan for being such a great supporter of the ADF. We look to you again this year for strong support for the ADF replenishment through more donor grants and concessional donor loans. Thank you. The ADF is developing plans to leverage its $25 billion in equity to potentially raise $33 billion from capital markets in long-term low-interest rate resources that will better support ADF countries. The ADF market access will reduce debt vulnerabilities. Now think of the following. If the ADF countries that have gone to the capital markets to raise Eurobonds worth $30 billion and 10 billion euros had come to the African Development Bank Group for financing, they would have saved $22 billion and 7.8 billion euros in interest payments alone. So, the ADF market access will not add to debt. Rather, it will help to reduce debt and debt vulnerability. To further address the debt challenges, African Development Bank is now taking several actions. First, the bank approved a 3-year multi-dimensional debt action plan for the management and mitigation of debt distress, with a goal of supporting countries to make debt work better for Africa. Second, the bank approved a 5-year strategy for economic governance in Africa, SEGA, which includes debt management and transparency as a core pillar. This will help to strengthen the capacity of countries to formulate and, of course, implement debt policy and medium-term debt strategy frameworks, ensure more prudent debt contracting and management, enhance debt statistics, recording, monitoring, and reporting, and promote the use of non-debt and innovative financing instruments. Third, this year, the bank approved the sustainable borrowing policy to guide its lending to countries while enhancing debt management and transparency and strengthening partnerships and coordination. Finally, in June of this year, the bank approved the establishment of a public financial management academy. The academy is dedicated to building national capacity in the entire public financial management cycle through structured training, policy dialogue, and technical assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa cannot run up a hill with a backpack full of sand on its back. Together, let us advance on debt restructuring. Together, let us advance economic governance reforms. And together, let us advance sustainable debt management. The African Development Bank stands fully ready to play its part. Thank you all very much and welcome again.